Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Brunswick. I'm Charlie Evans, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Our service today is being led by Rob Stuart, who is an ordained minister, a relatively recent Brunswick resident, and a member of our congregation. The topic of today's sermon will be aging as a fulfillment of life. Be safe, be well, and again, welcome.
Welcome to worship in this virtual gathering of our beloved community. Welcome into the presence of God, whose love is visible in all that calls forth awe in us, in all that stirs wonder and joy and the giving of thanks, in all that touches our hearts and breaks forth in empathy and compassion and a longing to make a difference. Welcome to all who ache to be held in the arms of God, who hunger to be comforted, who long to be released from pain. Welcome to all who know fear and anxiety, whose bodies are filled with tension and stress. Welcome to all who feel invisible, who are tormented by conflict, and who perhaps have known violence in a place that should have been safe. Welcome to all who dare to be vulnerable, who want to be true, who know they have much to give. Welcome to all who think they have nothing to offer, who sometimes feel that they are unworthy, who have all but given up hope. Welcome to this gathering of our beloved community, where everyone is loved, where everyone matters, where everyone makes a difference, and where everyone is cherished precisely for who they are. This service is about the beloved community, and it is about aging as the fulfillment of life, and it is about the dynamic relationship between those two. Martin Luther King Jr. moved the phrase, the beloved community, into the lexicon of American Christian churches. But it is not a phrase commonly used today, and it is even less well understood. The reason for this, I think, is because the beloved community is hard to reduce to abstract principles. It is that much harder to put a label that recalls those principles to mind. In fact, the beloved community is created out of the complex living that produces it. It is the result of engaging one another and by being engaged by the realities of life and all the individual realities that make up the community. We all remember the phrase nonviolent direct action, but perhaps few of us remember that that phrase was simply the chosen strategy for bringing about in a very troubled society a beloved community. And it never actually happened. That process was sidetracked by the Vietnam War on the one hand, and by the larger society reaction to King's expansion of his understanding. And he said that militarism, racism, and poverty are inextricably bound together. And it was the captains of industry and commerce who led the fight using this new reality of TV that had just come into being to resist and defeat the movement, even after King had died, that was set loose by the civil rights movement. Now, there were some small beloved communities that came into being then and after, but they were never the subject of significant reporting or scholarship, perhaps until now. To name a few, of course, you remember the sit-in movements, the Montgomery bus boycott that brought forth the creation of the Southern Christian Leadership Council, SNCC, that Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Albany movement, which is still ongoing, still led by the person who, as a young college student, started it in the middle 60s. But again, the big beloved community to which King aspired never happened. Aspects of the beloved community idea percolated through American thought and religious life ever since, and its elements were woven together in many places. One of those places is the Unitarian Universalist Church of Brunswick. The process was already well underway when you called Reverend Sylvia to your church. And the reason that you chose her and she chose you is in the fact that that spirit of love and service and transformation and inclusion and justice was already present in both of your hearts. In your time together, all the challenges, all the setbacks, all the choices that came your way were faced and turned into opportunities to grow together as a people of God. And along the way, you have turned into an even more substantive, beloved community, which is why all the rest of us has joined you since that time. So in this day, in our prayer and praise and sharing, we celebrate many things. We recall that it is the summer solstice. We lift up the precious lives of fathers and grandfathers in our midst. We give thanks to our beloved emeritus minister, Sylvia Stocker, and her husband, Steve Welcome. And we know that their spirits are forever entwined in the spirit of this community. And we also know that their hearts will be forever warmed by the love and appreciation of this community. And we give thanks again to all who have joined this beloved community, especially for the children and youth who bring such energy, joy, wisdom, confidence, and hope, and who share it all so unself-consciously and so freely.
Ben's Trumpet by Rachel Isadora. In the evening, Ben sits on the fire escape and listens to the music from the Zigzag Jazz Club. He joins in, playing his trumpet. Sometimes he plays until very late and falls asleep in the hot night air. Every day on the way home from school, Ben stops by the Zigzag Jazz Club. He watches the musicians practice. The pianist, the saxophonist, the trombonist, and the drummer. But most of all, Ben thinks the trumpeter is the cat's meow. Ben feels the rhythm of the music all the way home. He plays for his mama, his grandmother, and baby brother, and for his papa and his friends. One day, Ben is sitting on the stoop and playing his trumpet. "I like your horn," someone says. "It's the trumpeter from the Zigzag Jazz Club." Ben smiles and watches him walk to the club. The next day, after school, Ben stops and listens to the musicians practicing a red-hot piece. He starts blasting away at his trumpet. Some kids in front of the candy store watch him. "Hey, what are you doing?" they yell. Ben stops and turns around. "What do you think you're doing?" they ask again. "I'm playing my trumpet," Ben answers. "Man, you're crazy. You got no trumpet." They laugh and laugh. Ben puts his hands in his pockets and walks slowly home. He sits on the stoop and watches the blinking lights of the Zigzag Jazz Club. He sits there a long time, just watching. Down the street, the band comes out for a break. The trumpeter comes over to Ben. "Where's your horn?" he asks. "I don't have one," Ben says. The trumpeter puts his hand on Ben's shoulder. "Come on over to the club," he says. "And we'll see what we can do." I'll be reading 2 poems from the collection of Langston Hughes, The Dreamkeeper and Other Poems, illustrated by Brian Pinkney. Dreams by Langston Hughes. Hold fast to dreams. For if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. The Dreamkeeper by Langston Hughes. Bring me all of your dreams, you dreamers. Bring me all of your heart melodies, that I may wrap them in a blue cloud cloth, away from the too rough fingers of the world.
As long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. As long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. As long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I keep on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life.
A community is the mental and spiritual condition of knowing that the place is shared, and that the people who share the place define and limit the possibilities of each other's lives. It is the knowledge that people have of each other, their concern for each other, their trust in each other, the freedom with which they come and go among themselves. The poor are the center of the church. But who are the poor? At first we might think of people who are not like us. People who live in slums, people who go to soup kitchens, people who sleep on the street, people in prisons, mental hospitals, and nursing homes. But the poor can be very close. They can be in our own families, churches, or workplaces. Even closer, the poor can be ourselves, who feel unloved, rejected, ignored, or abused.
Our sense of who we are, whether as individuals or church or nation, is embedded in the narrative we tell ourselves about who we are. Those narratives never stop changing. Old elements drop out or are totally refrained over time as we evolve to a different point of view about what we most value. Too often that narrative focuses on what other people might value or think about us, like where I went to college, or what job or career I might have, or what watch I wear, or what car I drive. There are other things we rarely share, although they may be a deep part of our sense of self. Like perhaps when I was 16, my body changed. I dropped 3 dress sizes and I came to like myself a lot better. Or when I went to high school, I decided to try out for the cross-country team. I found that I could be really good at it. And I liked being part of a group who were glad I was there. Even less often do we talk about the value choices, the meaning of life choices we have made, and why we made them. But these are the choices which are most telling and which make us vulnerable and open to intimate sharing and creative interaction with other people. We do not talk much about character anymore, but what matters most are the valued choices that have produced our deepest sense of self and our affirmations of the values that were churning and moving in us, that produced our deepest sense of self, of who we are, and they are the ones that produce our character. The other related biggest impacts on our lives are the things that we did not choose, but which happened to us. Things that have dramatically changed or limited who or what we were or could be. These changes affected our narrative and our account of who we are. And this is where the role of the beloved community looms large. When it functions well, it becomes sufficiently vital that it can stand in between the toxic and dysfunctional elements of the ecology of our larger society. And that is precisely the role the black church played from the beginning of this country to the 1960s and the emergence of the civil rights movement, and continues to this day. Pastoral care and justice are the two hands of the outreach of the church in the world, and they provide a secure place for us to overcome the toxicities of our larger society. The first small story I'm going to share is about the fact that you don't have to be old for your life to have immense meaning. When my dad, at the age of 14 and the eldest of 6 siblings, was brought by his mother to this country, living an alcoholic husband back in Scotland, he worked from that age of 14 to support his family. On the first Thanksgiving in this country, the neighbor across the hall from their Hartford apartment invited my grandmother and the family to join them for Thanksgiving. But my grandmother said, "No, thank you. This is our first Thanksgiving, and we must begin our own holiday traditions." Now, I didn't learn the last part of this story until I was in my 20s. Probably I had been told earlier or overheard it earlier, but I was not listening. And my father was sharing this story at a Thanksgiving when I, again, in my early 20s. And he finished it by saying that it was on this day, our first Thanksgiving, that our youngest sister, Helen, passed away from diphtheria. And I was startled, and I think I probably leapt forward to say, "Didn't that ruin your first Thanksgiving and subsequent Thanksgivings?" And his comment was kind of surprised at the question, and his answer was very simple. "No, we were so grateful at how long we had her with us. How could we be unhappy? How could we be sad?" The second little story is of 2 sisters who lived their lives in the same town and most of their lives in the same family house they had grown up in. Neither one of them had descendants to pass the house on to, and it was for sale. So a friend and I, who had been talking about the importance of helping this community learn a different way of financing affordable housing, did as an experiment, we bought that house. And I got to know the 2 sisters a little better. Ironically, one of the sisters was a member of the church, but she wasn't ever very present or ever very participatory in her time in the church. The other sister was always negative, and as far as I could see, didn't belong to anything. But after they sold the house, they both moved to individual units of a fine retirement home that was run by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. When I went to visit each of the sisters, I saw already that the negative sister was acting very differently. She spent her days visiting every other patient she could reach. And she did things like wipe a fevered head with a damp cloth, change the ice and water in a glass, write a letter for someone whose rheumatic fingers no longer could really hold a pen. Every day she did different things. And when I visited the other sister, she only seemed to be retiring deeper into the shadows and found no way to reach out and connect. Both of those were a surprise to me, but I never forgot the sister who stepped out of a corner in her life and found the gift of service. And the last story is Doris Parentoni. She was one of those people who always was filled with grievances. When I would go into the church early on a Sunday morning and I saw her on one side talking to people in the choir who were getting ready to practice, I would go down the opposite aisle just to avoid what she had pulled that day from her garden of grievances, well tended that it was. But a few years later, I was attending a conference on the place of the Spirit in healing. And my wife had gotten a call from a friend of Doris that she was had just been told that she had a serious life-threatening cancer. So when I got home from this week, one of the first things I did was I went to see Doris. And that began a few months process of visiting her once or twice a week. And the amazing thing is that from the beginning, she changed dramatically. And other people from her choir and her best friend from the choir visited her frequently as well. And one of the things that she did was begin to read her Bible, which she had never really spent time with. And she was very glad to tell me one day, she said, see what I can do? When I hurt and no medication takes the pain away, I just put the Bible right on that part of my stomach and I feel better. And then she began, every time I visited, to have let go and apologized for another grievance she had held. The last two that she let go were these. She said, when I came in, she couldn't wait for me to get there. She was so excited to share these things. Why, do you know, I have forgiven my son, and we have now a relationship that means something to both of us. And I had no idea what she was talking about. She said, he is gay. And for years, I held it against him. And I did not share love to him. And now I just am so glad to see him and tell him how much I admire who he is. And then I guess it was even the next week when I came in, she was so excited. She couldn't wait to tell me. She said, can you see the difference? And my mind went to think, does she think she's getting better? I didn't, because I couldn't see any difference. She was under 90 pounds, frail and wan and just haggard in some ways. And she held out her left hand and she said, see, I have my wedding ring on. And I had never noticed it wasn't on. But she had finally forgiven her husband and was ashamed for how long it took. I knew nothing of the details of their lack of connection because her husband never came to church. Doris alone came. But she died within the week, and she was radiant to all who visited her at the time of her death. And in many ways, her way of dying was a huge witness in the forming of the beloved community that was emerging in that little church in Canaan, Connecticut. We are blessed be part of this fellowship that is so richly filled with people who have in their lives grown to heal so many things and to gather together in a great desire to bring love and justice and spiritual care to the larger society. And both of those things are essential to making the changes that make our lives and our communities' lives beautiful.
When we are gathered for a time of worship and of song, let none forget the joys and grief that mark each path of life, and thus we reach for those who love, we reach for those who love. For youth shall pass and time is wise, and countless seasons turn, so day by day our years increase, until at last by life released our spirits shine like stars, our spirits shine like stars. And time is wise, and countless seasons turn, so day by day our years increase, until at last by life released our spirits shine like stars, our spirits shine like stars.
Would you join me in a time of prayer? Loving and creative Spirit, whose presence is visible all over this universe, we are so grateful for your presence in the center of our lives. In this time of our transition from Reverend Sylvia Stocker to our new interim clergy coming in August, we know that you will keep the bonds and the mission of this fellowship at the front of our minds, that we might be in the right place to joyously welcome she who comes to live and share and serve with us. And we take a moment and remember the fathers and grandfathers who helped nurture us. And we give thanks to all the fathers and grandfathers who envision and nurture and build love and community in their families' lives, in their work lives, and in this beloved community. And we thank you for all who have joined and will join. And we know that the vision will but expand and the energy but continue to nurture, care for, and bring justice to the larger world in which we live. Thank you for your presence and the promise of our future. Amen.